On September 10th, 2025, something absolutely shocking happened. A major political figure, Charlie Kirk, was assassinated. In public, during a speech. No one disputes that it happened. But what happened next, that's where things get really crazy. Because from that one event, two completely different, totally irreconcilable stories were born. So let's break this down.
Okay, so here are the bare bones facts of that day, the stuff nobody argues about. At 12:11 p.m., Kirk starts his speech. A little over 12 minutes later, bam, a single shot rings out. And by that afternoon, he was pronounced dead. It's from this one violent moment that two completely separate realities just branch off in opposite directions. So what are these two stories? Well, you've got the official line. This was a politically motivated lone gunman. Tragic, simple, straightforward. But then you have this incredibly detailed counter-narrative that says, no way. They claim this was a professional hit, a contract elimination, orchestrated from the inside. Now, obviously, they can't both be right, and they disagree on literally everything, starting with the most basic physical evidence.
And if you really want to get to the heart of this whole conflict, you have to start with the forensics. This is where the two narratives just go to war with each other. Over the weapon, the path of the bullet, all the physical stuff.
It all kicks off with the most fundamental piece of evidence in any shooting, right? The murder weapon. And this isn't some small disagreement about, the model number. We're talking about two completely different types of firearms.
Get this. The official report says the weapon was a Mauser Model 98, a vintage, bolt-action rifle. But the other theory? They say the real weapon was a modern, suppressed AR-15. That's not a minor detail. You're talking about completely different tools meant for completely different kinds of jobs.
And here's where you can really see how each weapon props up its own story. The Mauser, it's described as an antique hunter's rifle, found dumped in the woods. That just screams lone amateur, right? An emotional crime. But a suppressed AR-15, that's a professional's tool. It's for a clean, non-traceable kill. And the reason it was never found, according to the theory, is because a handler snatched it up and got it out of that.
So if the stories can't agree on the weapon, it's probably no surprise they can't agree on what that weapon did, specifically the path the bullet took. This is the next huge contradiction we have to look at.
The official investigation pins the shooter on the rooftop of a building called the Luzzi Center, 142 yards away from Kirk. Now, to give you a sense of that, that's almost 1.5 football fields. That distance is absolutely critical because it basically defines the geometry of the entire crime.
And here's why that matters so much. A shot from 142 yards away is going to travel on a relatively flat path. But the counter-narrative? It claims the total opposite. They say the shot was fired from super close range at a really steep downward angle, almost like an execution. And look, those two bullet paths are just physically impossible. They can't both have happened.
And this is where the two stories become completely irreconcilable. The official report says the rooftop was the sniper's nest. Simple. But the counter-narrative completely flips that on its head. They say that steep downward angle is the signature of a professional cleaner. And in their version, the rooftop wasn't for shooting at all. It was the last leg of the assassin's escape route.
Okay, so with these huge contradictions in the physical evidence, it's no surprise that the counter-narrative starts to widen its net. It moves beyond just forensics and starts pointing fingers, alleging a massive, coordinated cover-up involving the people right there on the scene and the agencies investigating.
And that brings us to the shooter himself. Officially, the suspect is a 22-year-old named Tyler Robinson, a lone gunman, supposedly fueled by political anger. But the counter-narrative says Robinson is just a patsy, a designated patsy to take the fall. They claim the real killer was an unidentified professional, a military-grade cleaner who was just there to do a job for cash.
The allegations of a conspiracy get incredibly specific and, frankly, pretty chilling. The counter-narrative points to gestures that were supposedly seen between security staff and a man in the crowd right before the shot. They interpret this as a covert signal. Target acquired, clear to fire. If that's true, it means the security team wasn't there to protect Kirk, but to make sure the assassin had a clean shot.
So you might be asking, well, what about the FBI? Didn't they look into this? And this is where the counter-narrative introduces a concept they call the Patel Doctrine. The idea is that when the FBI comes out and publicly addresses and debunks these theories, it's not actually about transparency. It's a calculated PR move. They give the illusion of being thorough, but what they're really doing is nullifying the claims and reinforcing their own story. So the counter-narrative starts connecting a lot of dots that, to them, look pretty suspicious. It starts with the crime scene itself. They immediately began remodeling, which looked a lot like destroying evidence. Then their focus shifts to Charlie Kirk's wife, Erica. Her calm demeanor was described as a rehearsed performance, and her very public embrace of Donald Trump afterward was seen as a kind of affirmation of a successful transaction. And the final piece? Her swift, unanimous appointment as the new CEO? That wasn't seen as honoring a legacy, but as the final payout for a job well done.
And all of this, of course, brings us to the biggest question in any murder investigation. Why? What was the motive? And just like with everything else in this case, the two narratives give us answers that are from completely different planets.
The official motive is pretty straightforward. It was external. It was political rage coming from an enemy. But the counter-narrative's motive is much darker, and it's completely internal. They call it an act of internal asset management. What that means is they believe Charlie Kirk wasn't killed by his enemies, he was killed by his own side.
But why on earth would his own allies want him dead? Well, according to this theory, Kirk had become a liability, a dangerous loose cannon. He was apparently defying his handlers, fighting with his own team, and making some really powerful enemies inside his own party. His rhetoric was getting so extreme that he was becoming a massive legal and financial risk to the dark money donors funding the whole operation. In their eyes, he had become uncontrollable, a bigger threat alive than dead.
So the real payout, this theory claims, was turning a problem into a product. The people behind it supposedly traded the unstable, unpredictable real person for Charlie Kirk the Martyr, a powerful symbol, a symbol that was profitable and, most importantly, controllable. This new image could rally the base, bring in millions in donations, and be easily managed by his successor.
So after you look at the forensics, the people involved, the possible motives, you're not left with a clear answer. You're left with this deep, unsettling split. Two complete, detailed stories, both trying to explain one single tragic event.
What we're left with are two realities that just can't exist at the same time. In one, you have a tragic political murder by an outsider. In the other, you have a deep state-style execution, a professional hit designed from the ground up to look like the work of an amateur. The question isn't just which one is true, it's how can both of these stories seem so thought out and, to their believers, so plausible?
And that really leaves us with the big final question, doesn't it? When an official account collides with a counter-narrative that is this complex, this detailed, and this contradictory, how is the truth ultimately decided? What does it take for one story to finally bury the other?